Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
So, Jonathan, I know something that happened during the campaign that you thought was really interesting as somebody who's been something of a scholar of anti-Semitism and dog whistles and the rest. Happened right here on CNN when President Trump talked to Wolf Blitzer. Now, this is after Julia Yaffe, who I mentioned just a second ago, had written a profile of Melania Trump, and it wasn't a nasty profile. It wasn't a particularly friendly profile. It was just a profile. It was a journalistic profile. After which, Julia's Jewish, and she was targeted with a whole bunch of very nasty anti-Semitic imagery about, putting her in ovens and the like. Wolf Blitzer asked then candidate Donald Trump about this. Take a listen.
These anti-Semitic.
I don't know about that. I don't know anything about that. You mean fans of mine?
Supposed fans of yours posting these very angry.
You'll have to talk to them about it.
But your message to these fans is?
I don't have a message to the fans.
Why do you think that's important?
I think that's important because time and time again, when the president has been given an opportunity to stand up forthrightly and condemn the hatred around him, he has shown diffidence, reluctance, or that kind of thing, that it's not my fault. At the same time, Melania Trump was confronted about Yaffe's profile and the absolute anti-Semitic hate that rained down on Julia, and her response was, Julia provoked it. That is not standing up for the things that we like to believe America is about, which is pluralism, democracy, love thy neighbor. And he has gotten the chance so many times, and so many times he has just let it slap by.
And the fact that he has, Jewish folks in his family, as Scaramucci brought up, that's just like saying, I'm married to a black person, so that makes me less of a racist.
Some of my best friends are Jewish.
Right, or some of my best friends are Jewish or Hispanic or indigenous. What is in this man's heart, i.e. the president, comes out time and time again when he doesn't have a script in front of him, and that is what we are dealing with. We are in a moment of transcendence in this country, and either we can continue to work to create a more perfect union, which we have to do every generation, or we can regress, and I see regression.
Yeah, look, I don't believe it. I don't believe the president loathes his Jewish grandchildren.
No, I didn't say it.
I don't believe he loathes. Listen, okay,
don't say that. I didn't say that.
No one thinks that.
I did not say this. How about I
did not say that.
Okay, Nina, I don't believe the president.
No, it's not just. I did not say that.
I'm not trying to characterize that.
Okay.
I don't believe the president loathes Jewish Americans, or listen, Jonathan, or I don't believe the president supports anti-Semitism.
What do you think? What are you actually accusing the president of? Because I'd like David to specifically address that.
The argument is not over what is in President Trump's mind. We're not calling him a racist. We're not calling him an anti-Semite. We don't know. What I am saying is the president has shown a reluctance time and time again to shun his supporters. Right. And his supporters, as Andrew Gillum said, I'm not calling you a racist. I'm just saying that the racists think you're a racist.
That's right.
This is a case where the anti-Semites believe that he is on their side, and he hasn't pushed back hard enough to say,
so what do you
I am
say
not...
Today. He said,
he needs to have a clear answer about David Duke when he's asked. He needs to not toss around words like nationalism when we know what his supporters in those dark corners of the internet take from it. He has to clean that up. And if he doesn't, he is allowing it to continue.
The president missed an opportunity, Wolf, right there, back in the day to say that, correct it. He should correct it. The president should stand up forcefully like he did yesterday and condemn this. And condemn the actions.
Do you know that the last advertisement of President Trump's campaign for president talked about global special interest as the Jewish faces of Janet Yellen, George Soros, and
I think we have
Lloyd Blankfein went by. I mean, and that's not a dog whistle. That's a vuvuzela, as somebody said.
Let me. Do we? Control room. Do you have that element ready? Because we talked about this before. Okay. So this was the last TV ad that President Trump and his campaign ran right before the election, and as Jonathan Weissman accurately points out, it uses the imagery of three individuals who are Jewish: Janet Yellen, then the Fed chair, Lloyd Blankfein from Goldman Sachs, and George Soros, who is a billionaire financier and funds a lot of liberal causes. Let's just take a little look at that.
For those who control the levers of power in Washington, and for the global special interests, it's a global power structure that is responsible for the economic decisions that have robbed our working class, stripped our country of its wealth, and put that money into the pockets of a handful of large corporations and political entities.
I mean, that sends a shiver down my spine. And you know what? We can dismiss it, but sends a shiver down my spine.
I'm not going to dismiss it. I'll say this. Let me try to explain it, perhaps, right? So Goldman Sachs, there's an ad for Wall Street. Janet Yellen, chairman of the Fed. George Soros, billionaire left-wing guy. That's how I see the ad.
But there's language.
It didn't have Sheldon Adelson, billionaire wing guy.
Because it's an ad against Democrats, not against Republicans.
That's part of
that ad against Republicans.
We can deny it. We can deny it. We can deny it.
It is Monday, the 29th of October of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays, because it's been another one of those weekends, and we have to put tragedy upon tragedy, because, after all, this is modern America. And on the international scene, we have, well, I don't know, is he a mini Trump over there in Brazil? I don't know. He gets to do a lot of the things that Trump wishes he could do, but there's this institutional roadblock against Trump, and pretty much those roadblocks, if they ever existed in any strength in Brazil, well, they're non-existent with this guy. And he called indigenous people their parasites. You would expect a parasite to call people who actually live and have lived in an area for, I don't know, millennia to be the parasites. It's always the parasite that says that, isn't it? Okay. Well, it looks like we're going to throw our lot in with Brazil and team up against... Or wait a second. Maybe Brazil will now be Trump's proxy to go to war with Canada. Wouldn't that be something? I put my lot on Canada. If you think Russia has only the economy of Italy, Brazil? Give me a break. I don't know. I think Luxembourg has better economy than Brazil. I mean, you would expect to, because it's Luxembourg. Jeez. Look at all of that rainforest that's going to be denuded now, also. Until they stop them. And there might be somebody who can. You never know. Even though police violence, killings by police is up about 800% just in the last year alone. And now this guy says he's going to take the gloves off. The police are going to take the gloves off. What? Wow. Modern times. And it looks like it's the media and unfunny comedians that caused the synagogue attack and the pipe bombs to be sent. Like I said, you would always expect the parasites to call true America the parasite. It's Monday, folks. It's Monday, and I might be a little pissed. I just might. At the top there, it essentially was a discussion. Oh God, I hate the right wing apologists. I really do. To determine whether or not Trump is an anti-Semite? Well, on one level, as the discussion proved, it doesn't matter if Trump is an anti-Semite. The anti-Semites believe that Trump is an anti-Semite. They do. But Trump knows exactly what he's doing. He's been on this trope for a very long time. The guy that was on Lou Dobbs, Trump knows him and has cited him repeatedly over the years. He knows exactly what anti-Semitism is and white nationalism is. He knows exactly. And I would think, since Trump has been on Howard Stern and said this, I would think that anybody who says that he's only going to have a Jew wearing a yarmulke, counting his money, that by definition, according to the Netroots Radio Style Manual, that by definition means that the guy is an anti-Semite. I don't know why it's so hard and difficult to determine. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays? A computer server crucial to a lawsuit against Georgia election officials was quietly wiped clean just after the suit was filed. Just in time for the election, isn't it? A 60-year-old U.S. citizen won a $55,000 settlement after she was wrongfully detained and then mocked by ICE. And late last week, DHS stripped funding from a group that counters neo-Nazi violence. Just in time for the holidays. And thank you, Pittsburgh. Trump is not welcome there. He wants to go there and extend his condolences. When you know what that means. Is he going to go there and talk about how bad it was for him? Well, after the break, we then move to the chef's table. Yes, we do. Where Trump's withdrawal of the California gillnet protections for whales, turtles, and other marine creatures is ruled illegal. And Democrats ask for proof of Trump's claims about China election interference, but all they get is silence. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Go to our homepage at netrootsradio.com. You will find links to be able to determine if you have registered to vote and are still registered to vote. And in many states, you still have time, even though the election is just, mere days away. But please make sure you're registered to vote. And in those states that you're still allowed to be able to register to vote, do hurry up. And even if you're registered to vote, get other people to register to vote. And if they are already registered, get them to vote. Okay? Please. It's going to take more than just a couple of villages to wrest back what we lovingly call America the Beautiful. Okay, so then scroll down to the bottom of the page at netrootsradio.com. The chat room link is on the rightish of the page, and that is a good way to engage us because Kelly Lincoln monitors that very diligently. And you can also listen to her shows Saturday at, the first one is At the Table with Kelly Lincoln on Saturday at 3 p.m. on the West Coast, 6 p.m. on the East Coast, and then a few hours later, she teams up with Ricky May And Ricky May is there in Nova Scotia, so that means she's a Canadian. I don't know. They might be our sworn enemy at any time now that we're teaming up with Brazil. But even if that is so, this is Resistance Radio, okay? And they command, beginning at 9 p.m. on the West Coast, midnight on the East Coast, they command the Roundtable Roundhouse Power Hour, and a power hour it is indeed. If you would then gaze over to the leftish of the page, at the bottom of our homepage, at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice the contribute button, and do become a Patreon of Netroots Radio. Your generosity keeps the bills paid so we can keep resisting. And as I mentioned late last week, I've been a bit bereft in figuring out the Patreon page. But I have noticed some Patreons have put into the tier in which they will get a bumper sticker. So I'll get on that right away. And do also drop me a note somewhere and remind me, okay? It gets really busy doing all the various things. Plus, I have real life commitments, too. Isn't that something? Well, we all do. Okay, so thank you for your generosity. Once again, it is paying the bills, and we will continue resisting, well, because we're on a mission from God. Okay, do follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, at Netroots Radio. Thank you, Tom, for taking care of that. Yeah, that's a big load off my shoulders, and he does it really well in such a, I don't know how I should put it, in such a concise and pointed way, as the Netroots Radio style manual will stipulate, indeed. You can also follow us on Facebook and most other social media platforms like Tumblr or whatnot, but we're on Facebook, such as it is, Zuckerberg. Did you hear Jack at Twitter's going to take away the like button because that's going to make less Nazis, or it's going to elevate the debate? Well, why did you turn the like button into a heart to begin with? Now you're going to rip the heart away from us? Just like a man. Okay, well, I'm a man, and I apologize for what men do. I'm trying to change their ways, but it takes, well, more than a village. Okay, enough of that. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. And that is, I should also remind you, an integral part to the show because they are show notes and links. You can follow the show, West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, on Twitter at Cookbook West. We're on Facebook and other places as well. Pick up podcasts at Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn, YouTube, iHeart, and iTunes, and really most anywhere podcasts can be found, good or not. All right. Well, I got through that. It's Monday. Okay. There's always an excuse, but I'm calling it Monday. This first article here is actually from AP News, the AP News break, and Frank Bajak is the reporter on this. A computer server crucial to a lawsuit against Georgia election officials was quietly wiped clean by its custodians just after the suit was filed. Well, that's convenient. The server's data was destroyed July 7th by technicians at the Center for Election Systems at Kennesaw State University. Oh, and they run the state's election system. Well, that's convenient too, isn't it? I wonder, does Kennesaw have any fiduciary responsibilities or connections with the Kochs, the Petersons, the Adelsons? Could it be with the Mercers? Because the Mercers really love that, data voter manipulation gig. The lawsuit, filed July 3rd by a diverse group of election reform advocates, aims to force Georgia to retire its antiquated and heavily criticized election technology. The server in question, which served as a statewide staging location for key election-related data, made national headlines in June, as reported here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, by the way, after a security expert disclosed a gaping security hole that wasn't fixed 6 months after he reported it to election authorities. Because it was a feature, not a bug, somebody had to get in there to be able to manipulate the data, as, they're tasked to do. They have a fiduciary responsibility because a contract is a contract. It's not clear who ordered the server's data irretrievably erased, but since Brian Kemp is the Secretary of State and is running for governor, I have my suspicions. The Kennesaw Election Center answers to Georgia's Secretary of State, Brian Kemp. Well, fancy that. And he is the suit's main defendant. His spokeswoman issued a statement Thursday saying his office had neither involvement nor advanced warning of the decision. It blamed the undeniable ineptitude at the Kennesaw State Election Center. Really? After declining comment for more than 24 hours, Kennesaw State's media office issued a statement attributing the server wiping to standard operating procedure. Oh, you meant FUBAR. And it did not respond to media questions on who ordered the action, because they haven't fixed that story yet, but they're working on it. Plaintiffs in the lawsuit, mostly Georgia voters, want to scrap the state's 15-year-old vote management system, particularly its 2,700 AccuVote touchscreen voting machines, which are hackable devices that don't use paper ballots or keep hard copy proof of voter intent. Jeez. I thought this was a representative Democratic republic. I really did. The server data could have revealed whether Georgia's most recent elections were compromised by hackers. The plaintiffs contend results of both last November's election and a special June 20th congressional runoff won by Kemp's predecessor, the Karen Handel. Remember her? Possible Russian interference in U.S. politics, including attempts to penetrate voting systems, has been an acute national preoccupation since the Obama administration sounded the alarm more than a year ago. Well, this is the AP. Should I even be citing this? God, I hope I don't get in trouble. Well, Kemp and his GOP allies insist Georgia's election systems is secure, but Marilyn Marks, executive director of the Coalition for Good Governance, a plaintiff, believes server data was erased precisely because the system is not secure. Well, Kemp believes it's secure because, look, the hole was put there at our request because somebody had to get in there to make sure that, people vote the way that they're supposed to be voting. We can't leave it up to chance, because obviously chance has a discernible liberal bias. Okay, this next offering here at the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Hey, nothing goes to waste here. Nothing. All right. Is brought to us by Jason Lincolns from Think Progress. Now, 60-year-old, that's 60, that's a 60, 60-year-old Guadalupe Plasencia was mocked by ICE agents while she was held in custody, and she's a U.S. citizen. But as you can see, or hear, or as you can tell, Guadalupe Plasencia has a discernible Latin sort of lilt to it, don't you think? And maybe that was the reason they wanted to mock her. You think you're a U.S. citizen? You don't sound like you're a U.S. citizen. Well, she lives in California and was detained by ICE despite having been a U.S. citizen for over 2 decades. And she won a settlement against the government. Guadalupe Plasencia, a 60-year-old from San Bernardino, California, will receive a $55,000 cash settlement from the federal government and San Bernardino County. Because they don't believe in sanctuary anything. You're an American citizen and you're being harassed by the government because of, your heritage? What do you think we are? Okay, so the settlement obtained through the assistance of the ACLU stemmed from a March 2017 incident in which the career hairstylist was detained overnight by county authorities over a decades-old bench warrant issued for her alleged failure to appear as a witness on a court date. As it turned out, she had been dropped from the trial. The next day, after being released from the West Valley Detention Center, she was intercepted by ICE agents and then taken into custody. The LA Times reported at the time Plasencia would spend the rest of the day in ICE custody, fearful that she would be deported despite having become an American citizen 20 years ago following an amnesty program initiated by President Reagan. Well, she ultimately won a release after her daughter arrived with a valid passport. We have to walk around with our passports now, especially if you're a person of color. Well, maybe I don't. Because I'm a man of a certain age who looks sort of like angry and white. So I can get away with it. But somebody who could be my sister. Well, my brother-in-law has gone through this when actually Ronald Reagan first imposed what we call the Segunda Linea. That was when what we called at the time the Border Patrol set up a checkpoint right around Irvine on the 405. And that's where you had to show your papers. Alan Ibrahimian of Foreign Policy brings us this final offering here at the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Now, Trump's approach to fighting extremism puts law enforcement front and center. Now, critics say that is dangerous. Well, he ran a campaign that emboldened right-wing extremists while focusing on policing Islamic radicalism. Now, some groups claim that Trump has brought that approach to the Department of Homeland Security. Really? Well, when Homeland Security was first made, I said, if you're going to model an institution, on the Teutonic Nazi model, I question what could go wrong. Meaning, something could go wrong. Late last week, DHS released a list of organizations receiving a total of $10 million in grants for countering violent extremism. Grant recipients had initially been selected days before the end of Barack Obama's tenure in office, but those funds were frozen, and the program placed under review after Trump took office. and the ones that would be policing and trying to minimize neo-Nazi violence? Well, we can't have that. That would take, maybe quite a bit of his base right out of the picture. Especially if they're charged with a felony in many states, because, they have a system where you have a felony, you don't get to vote. In an email, DHS spokesperson Lucia Martinez said the priority given to law enforcement is stated on their website, adding that 16 out of the 26 selected projects address all forms of violent extremism, including domestic political violent extremism and white supremacist violent extremism. Well, that's not necessarily true, but what they mean, well, it is true in one way. Instead of giving money to those who would try to go into the neo-Nazi community and try to, change the hearts and minds, we're going to let police departments probably integrate them into their organization because they kind of like that. I always say, if you give a Nazi a cookie, I'm not going to go to what they really want. But it's not ever good. So let's not give them a cookie. All right, we better get on with our break, and when we come back from said break, we will go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Another Man. Damien Chazelle's First Man refers to Neil Armstrong, first human to set foot on the moon. It follows his entrance into the Gemini program all the way to his historic Apollo mission. The hook for this latest space race flick is Chazelle's focus on how dangerous the journey was and how terrifying it was to crawl into newly conceived capsules sitting on top of missiles to be shot into space. This means loads of extreme close-ups, handheld camera, first-person perspective shots, and detailed Foley work of every creak, groan, and pop that a capsule leaving the atmosphere can make. First Man stars the Brad Pitt for millennials Ryan Gosling and a thoroughly wasted Claire Foy. Yes, wasted. You see, these great men movies had a problem. They lionized heroic males who benefited from a society that held women in socially, sometimes legally enforced, domestic servitude. Cooking meals, cleaning house, raising children, having more children, giving men the freedom to go to the moon, make movies, or make movies about men going to the moon. Women rightly complained that they've been left out of history, so now when you do a great man movie, you are obligated to show the woman behind him. The problem is, until we learn how to dramatize regular domestic responsibilities, there's not much for these women to do. Which leads us to the woman with the most cinematically engaging face in 4 decades, Claire Foy, playing Janet Armstrong. In a way, it's perfect casting for a movie with such spare dialogue, because one shot of Foy's eyes, and you can cut 1.5 pages of speech. But other than 2 angry outbursts, which seem more calculated to make Janet appealing to modern sensibilities than appropriate for her character, there's not much for Foy to do other than look worried. Why did she take this role? Maybe it was a career move. It gets her another American film credit, this one for a high-profile biopic going into Oscar season. So maybe it's a smart stepping stone. Let's hope she steps into a role that's more worthy of her talents. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Heart disease and stroke can be catastrophic. They're leading causes of death, disability, and healthcare spending in the U.S., yet they're largely preventable. Alarmingly, heart disease and stroke are taking a toll on middle-aged adults 35 to 64, with over 800,000 deaths and hospitalizations in 2016. Million Hearts is a national initiative focused on preventing 1 million heart attacks, strokes, and other cardiovascular events by 2022. Coordinated actions by Million Hearts partners in communities, healthcare, and public health, we'll keep people healthy, optimize care, and improve outcomes in populations at risk. Everyone has a part to play. Focus on the ABCs of heart health. A. Aspirin use when appropriate. B. Blood pressure control. C. Cholesterol management. And S. Smoking cessation. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
Vernon Madison has been in prison, on death row, in Alabama for 33 years. Now what? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. During those 33 years in prison, mostly in solitary confinement, Madison has suffered several strokes, and he now exhibits many symptoms of brain damage. He slurs his speech, he's disoriented, he's blind, he can't walk by himself, and he's incontinent. He also has no memory of the crime that put him on death row. But to the state of Alabama, none of this matters. Not his vascular dementia, not his cognitive deficits, not his severe memory loss, not his brain damage. Alabama still really wants to execute him. On Madison's side is his lawyer, Brian Stevenson, the renowned human rights attorney from the Equal Justice Initiative in Alabama. Stevenson argues that the Eighth Amendment prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment prohibits the execution of a person who does not remember the crime and has no understanding why he's being executed. The U.S. Supreme Court heard oral arguments on this case on October 2nd. We will soon find out if 5 Supreme Court justices will or won't vote in favor of this state-sponsored killing. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
If it's class warfare, we're the People's Army.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on Monday, October 29th, 2018. I'm Mark Boulanger. The International Trade Union Confederation is calling for a new global social contract to address problems such as unemployment, perilous work, and a widespread lack of social benefits such as health care and pensions. The ITUC is the global body which represents national labor centers such as the AFL-CIO in the United States and the Ghana Trade Union Congress. Sharon Burrow is the ITUC's General Secretary. She was interviewed at a recent meeting of the International Monetary Fund in Bali, Indonesia.
The future is in our hands. People talk about technology as if it's a force that on its own will simply go apace. We have choices about which technology, about how technology is managed, what the regulations are, and of course how it's introduced into the world of work. There's no doubt that we've lived with technology now for decades, and for trade unions and workers in the formal economy, that technology has largely been positive. It's been integrated into our work. Workers, we've negotiated increased skills and increased wage levels. But the pace of technology and some of the ethical questions we face is certainly at a speed and with challenges that we haven't seen before. However, you have to put those challenges in a bigger context. The convergence of global shifts is around the climate crisis, it's around technology, and it's around the historical numbers of displacement of people. So we would say to you, we need to make fundamental choices about whether, as we solve the problems of climate, or we look to integrate and support displaced workers, are we committed to full employment as a human race? And secondly, are we going to make sure that the policy and regulation is there to make sure every business has a social licence to operate and doesn't in fact oppress or exploit workers or sovereign nations by avoiding tax and operating as footloose, rule-based entities that don't take responsibility for their employment contracts, for their workforce and for the countries in which they make money from. For the world of work, we need a new social contract. The social contract that was struck after 2 world wars and a Great Depression was about making sure people had fundamental security, universal social protection, in a full employment model that work was in fact paid a minimum wage, that you had a capacity to bargain collectively, that freedom of association and the right to organise to share prosperity was at its heart. That's broken down. But now with those global shifts and with an economic model that has failed working people, we need to renew the social contract. It will be similar but different. It must have those fundamentals, but it must also look to the challenges of a global displacement of people, to an integrated set of economies, and if multilateralism is to survive, if we're to actually have a form of globalisation that people trust, then that new social contract is urgent. We have a global workforce that's now in trouble, even before we face the technological advances that are rapidly with us today and will be in the future. We have 60% of the 3 billion people on the planet who work that are in formal work, but more than half of those are in precarious, low-paid, often unsafe jobs. And then there's the 40% who are in the informal sector, who actually have none of those guarantees, no formal job, no minimum wage, no social protection, no rule of law. And up to 45 million of our workforce are in modern slavery. And now that informal work and modern slavery are appearing in our supply chains as well as in the poorest of countries. We have to have a new social contract that gives everybody the guarantee of work on which you can live, that deals with unemployment as well as underemployment, that deals with formalising work and gives people the hope of a future where they'll have the skills and they can share prosperity that comes from those skills.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. Hear the frustration in the voice of Marzuki Darusman, the chair of the UN fact-finding mission on Myanmar, as he told the Security Council this week of an ongoing genocide against the country's Rohingya Muslims.
The events in Myanmar could serve as a step-by-step manual. Dehumanize a population. Call them all terrorists. Deprive them of all rights. Segregate and attack them. Rape and kill them. Crowd them in IDP camps or drive them out. And protect the killers from justice. These steps can, and almost certainly will, be learned and deployed in other countries against other populations.
Darusman said Myanmar's predominantly Buddhist military destroyed hundreds of Rohingya villages in August 2017, and that reports of 10,000 dead Rohingya were conservative. Those atrocities, he said, must be referred to the International Criminal Court immediately. Alan Cooper is a genocide scholar at North Carolina Central University.
The only way the International Criminal Court can prosecute for genocide is if the perpetrator is an insignificant group that is not a friend of one of the 5 superpowers that control the Security Council.
Myanmar isn't one of those insignificant states. It enjoys close ties to Russia and China, both of whom could prevent a referral of the Rohingya genocide to the ICC. But Dr. Samuel Totten, a presidential scholar at Chapman University, is more optimistic. He gathered victim testimony from the Darfur genocide in the early 2000s when Sudan enjoyed Russian protection. But Russia wound up referring the Darfur case to the ICC, and years later the court sought evidence from Totten's interviews. That history, he said, should convince those documenting Myanmar's genocide to remain engaged.
One never knows how this information that's being collected now is going to be used.
Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. And we always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 48 degrees Fahrenheit. We are slated to be a bit cooler than we were yesterday with a high of about 59. Though I say it could be 60, or it could be 58. In that range, and it is indeed cooler than it was yesterday. We were bumping more around 65, 68. And we did have rain. And we had a bit of rain over the weekend. Not constant, but enough that the garden likes it. And the trees love it even more. So we need to get whatever we can into the ground table so those trees can survive. We are expected for an overnight low in the low 40s, and for the next few days we'll be in the upper 50s to low 60s, and with those relatively chilly nights as they're getting into the low 40s, and maybe that means upper 30s, mid 30s, and the more shaded valleys. Right now we are cloudy with a little bit of mist. There are rain cells in the area being moved our way by winds that are out of the west-southwest, moving a negligible 1 to 2 miles per hour, which is light and variable, and they will remain light and variable throughout the day, through the night, and tomorrow, continuing in that west-southwest direction. And it looks like we will have about 20 to 40% chance of rain, which means that isolated rain cells will be moving through, and they might just want to drop where you are, or if you happen to be in my geographical landscape and location. I don't know what that means. Let's see. Ragweed pollen is the dominant pollen right now, and it is rated low. The air quality index is good at 8 parts per million. That's really good. And the daytime UV index remains moderate at 3, just in time for the fall. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.18 inches. Visibility is around 6 miles, and that relative humidity is 93% because there's a bit of, mist and drizzle still occurring as we speak. Okay. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 48 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 42 and cloudy, and they could have disruptions because of rain. And Rome, which is, maybe, as the crow flies, not too far. If a crow could fly over the Alps. But Rome also, right now is 73, mostly cloudy with wind, and they have possible disruptions to everything, infrastructure and everything, because of heavy rain. Wow. Kiev is 58 and cloudy. Kabul is 63 and fair. Hong Kong is 72 and clear. Tokyo is 60 degrees and clear with a wind advisory. Wow. Sydney, Australia is 61 degrees and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 57 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is 52 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is Weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Zuckerman brings us this first offering here, if you don't count the weather report, at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and she is out of Reuters. The Trump administration unlawfully withdrew a plan to limit the number of whales, turtles, and other marine creatures permitted to be inadvertently killed or harmed by drift gill nets used to catch swordfish off California. And a federal judge ruled that. The decision requires U.S. fisheries managers to take steps to implement the plan, which calls for placing numerical limits on the bycatch of bottlenose dolphins, 4 whale species, and 4 sea turtle species snared in swordfish gill nets. Darn, we have to think about all this flotsam. God, I hate people that just, as currently written. Oh, let me jump in here right now. Maybe it will take not buying some swordfish for a while. In fact, it's pretty damn high as it is. Sustainable fisheries, please. And that doesn't mean farmed. As currently written, the regulation in question also would mandate suspension of swordfish gillnet operations altogether off Southern California if any one of the bycatch limits were exceeded. Well, maybe they need to do swordfish by pole. Okay? Like they do tuna. Stop with the gill nets. The Pacific Fishery Management Council endorsed the plan in 2015, and it was formally proposed for implementation by the U.S. Commerce Department's National Marine Fishery Service the following year. Oh, an Obama-era regulation. Always getting in the way. A black guy did it, let's get rid of it. That's how they think. The rule was expected to gain final approval, but was abruptly withdrawn instead in June 2017 under Donald Trump, whose Commerce Department, Wilbur, determined the cost of the commercial fishing industry outweighed conservation benefits. Well, of course, Wilbur would determine that. The environmental group Oceana sued, accusing the Commerce Department of violating U.S. fisheries law and the Federal Administrative Procedures Act. And Wilbur said, "What? What's that?" Oceana also asked the courts to order the agency to put the bycatch limits into effect. U.S. District Judge R. Gary Klausner declined to force the National Marine Fisheries Service to immediately implement the restrictions in a decision handed down on Wednesday in Los Angeles. But he did side with environmentalists in finding the agency's reversal exceeded its authority and was, quote, arbitrary, capricious, or an abuse of its discretion. I like to say that they abuse their power. But that's why it's only my middle name, this Justice. Royal is the first name. What were my parents thinking? Klausner ordered federal fisheries managers to either reissue the regulations as written or consult with the Pacific Fishery Management Council on any revisions. Drift gill nets, consisting of mile-long strands of nylon mesh draped 200 feet deep in the ocean from surfaced floats, pose a hazard to a wide assortment of marine mammals and turtles that can be entangled and then drown. According to Oceana, about 20 vessels make up the California drift gillnet fishery, and they ended up discarding about 61% of their catch from 2004 to 2017. You're going to throw away hundreds of marine creatures to get one swordfish. Of course, we do come from a nation that, wanted to strip mine. Blow the tops off mountains to get the ore from within. Why not scrape the ocean bare?
Je te donne seulement l'amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Casey Michelle of Think Progress brings us this final offering here at the Chef's Table of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. For weeks, Democratic senators have been trying to obtain evidence to back up Trump's claim that China was trying to interfere in the upcoming U.S. midterm elections. Thus far, they have gotten nothing in return. Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon and Kamala Harris of California and Martin Heinrich of New Mexico have sent multiple letters to Director of National Intelligence Dan Coats requesting information about whether Trump's claims line up with intelligence community assessments. Weeks after Coats' office said he would respond, an aide for Wyden told Think Progress late last week the senators have yet to receive an answer. The senators first requested information from Coats in his office on October 4th. In a joint letter, they noted Trump specifically claimed at the UN that he had evidence of Chinese attempts to interfere in the 2018 election. The senators asked whether that claim was supported by the intelligence community's own findings. After weeks of silence, the three senators sent another letter this week, which is today, reiterating their request. The second letter also noted Trump's new claim that China had meddled in the 2016 election. Once more, the senators requested information on whether the intelligence community had any evidence for those claims, or whether the president's statement was consistent with intelligence community assessment. And, of course, Beijing has disputed the claims, calling them unwarranted accusations, but we already know what China's up to in other areas. Isn't it just like Trump to sow this confusion and discord? Of course it is. Now, Coats has not been shy about issuing warnings regarding foreign interference efforts in the past, at least when it comes to Russia, and that's why you never hear about Dan Coats anymore. And I should say that if there was something along the lines of China, Dan Coats would be letting us know. One of the aspects of China's more traditional lobbying campaign appears to be recent advertising buys in American newspapers, including across the Midwest, criticizing the Trump administration's recent trade policies aimed at Beijing. And the scope of the ads, as one analyst told the media, were unprecedented, at least in the American Midwest. None of those examples, though, have been brought to bear in the U.S., at least recently, and the longer the silence from the intel community, the more it appears Trump was misreading evidence on hand or simply trying to distract from the Russian interference efforts that backed his candidacy in 2016. Indeed. Okay, we better get out of here. We're running a little... Well, we're running. We got to run. So we'll meet up tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. But Netroots Radio does broadcast on all through the night, all through the day, all through the night with all the breaking news as it breaks. So stay tuned and we'll visit with you right here tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.